Introduction about him, but to do my duties, I just have to mention that he has been one of the reasons that we are hosting this conference at Cochin in India. A year ago, exactly September 28th last year, when I met Mr. Espion at the UN, he suggested, just like a passing comment, if this would be interesting for us to consider here. And I think it's a year past now. In another 3 days, we'll clock it as a year. And we thank you for trusting us to host this. Mr. Espion is the international president of the WFAD. WFAD needs no introduction, but he will go through his speech and you'll understand more about what they do and what's the focus and what's the international mission. I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. And well, friends, I say. After the encouraging statement from the governor, I thought that maybe I should skip my speech and just say, yes, we can. And then we go back into small groups and we write down all the good proposals we have, and that's it. But as I have prepared, I think I will give it a chance for you to listen to some of what WFAD is doing, and also my thoughts from 40 years of experience, more or less, with development and dealing with substance abuse on the global, local, regional, national level. Where do I put this? I put it. Just press. No. Oh, there. There it is. Let me start with an overview of World Federation Against Drugs. It was founded in Sweden in 2009. It's quite a young network, international network. It's a multilateral community of non-governmental organizations and individuals. The work is built on the principles of universal fellowship and the basic human and democratic rights. The aim of the World Federation Against Drugs is to work for a drug-free world. And we have something like 250 member organizations on the global level. What we are doing, we are working for prevention, we are working for recovery, and we are also working strictly with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, because that's the only convention that talks about how to deal with drugs and who should not deal with drugs. We are doing systematic advocacy. We are talking about harms to others, and we are talking about the industry. We are supporting our members, especially here in India today and the coming 2 days. We are also planning a similar forum in Singapore later in November. We have plans to do it in East Africa, a smaller one in the beginning of next year. And in November as well, we are going to the Balkans to have a regional forum there. Sometimes an utopian vision can easily be dismissed in our world of fast solutions and pragmatism. That is why I would like you to borrow a few words from Eduardo Galeano, who is saying the following. Utopia lies at the horizon. When I drew nearer by 2 steps, it retreats 2 steps. If I proceed 10 steps forward, it swiftly slips 10 steps ahead. No matter how far I go, I can never reach it. What then is the purpose of utopia? It is to cause us to advance. And to advance we need. At the times like this, we all need to unite around our utopia of a world where people live free from the harm caused by drugs. We are the absolute majority, but I'm really worried that our voices are not being heard. Instead, we hear loud and clear voices of those who wish to make drugs more present in our lives. We are hearing those who have already made their life fortune on selling drugs, saying that everything will be fine when lives are lost, families broken, and hopes vanished. I'm standing here and represent civil society that speaks for the silent majority. Children, spouses, parents, grandparents, colleagues, friends, classmates, teammates, innocent victims of violence, innocent victims of neglect, innocent victims of accidents. Witness to suffering, witness to loss, the silent majority. The majority that images a better world. The majority that wishes to live free from drugs. The majority that wishes to live free from problems caused by drugs. And I hope that by this speech I can deliver the voice of the silent majority and discuss what civil society, what we can do and is doing to make the silence roar. In the UNODC World Drug Report 2019, there is an estimation that 188 million people are using cannabis. 53 million people are using opioids. 29 million people are using amphetamine-type stimulants. 21 million people are using ecstasy, and some 18 million people are using cocaine. But UNODC also estimates that 4.6 billion adults around the world are choosing a drug-free life. That is more than 94% of the world's population in the age between 18 and 64 who did not use drugs the last 12 months. Despite such a striking low prevalence, out of 43 factors, drug use was number 19th in the ranking of the top global killers. Tobacco was number 2nd, and alcohol was number 3. The cost of the harms in terms of human lives, health, public safety, environment, and GDP are disproportionate and already far too high for us to stand idle by and watch. Inaction may result in much higher levels of drug-related harm in the future. There is no reason to wait and hesitate. Governments and civil society have effective and evidence-based measures at hand. The growing scientific evidence provides insight into causes and consequences of drug use. We know the risk and the protective factors leading to or discouraging people from drug use. We have sufficient knowledge about drug addiction, better understanding about what works in prevention and treatment, as well as insights gained from the real-life experiments of cannabis legislation. Given the harm drug use causes, tackling the world drug problem has been recognized as a priority of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Governments has committed to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages by strengthening the prevention and the treatment of substance abuse, including narcotic drug abuse and harmful use of alcohol in Target 3.5. Today, we live in a world of contrasts, in a world of abundance and scarcity. The world drug problem is no exception. On the one hand, we are flooded with prescription drugs, especially in high-income countries, and on the other hand, there is a lack of access to essential medications in low and middle-income countries. Furthermore, in some cases, young people use drugs in order to add excitement to their lives, not knowing what else to do. And in others, poverty fuels drug use among those living in extreme conditions who as well do not know what else to do. It is obvious that in order to create a world where people can live in dignity, the root causes leading to drug use need to be addressed. And as so many civil organizations are already selflessly addressing. But what civil society organizations are as well doing is that they are demanding and supporting the governments to implement comprehensive solutions. Solutions that do not include the introduction of social programs, education and health services, involvement of communities and investing in people's safety and well-being are insufficient and won't see the expected result benefiting the old people. We cannot afford ineffective solutions. We need to act, and we need to hold each other accountable. We need to celebrate the victories and advancements we make, but we cannot stop making thorough analysis and closing our eyes from what is not working. When we look back at the developments in narcotic drugs fields in the latest decade, we can say that not is all bad, but not is all good either. Let me take you through the progress that we observe and that encourages many civil society organizations to continue their work in the slums of Kenya, in the hill tribe communities of the Golden Triangle, or in the neighborhoods in Colorado. Given the efforts to reduce the world drug problem in the last decade, between 2009 and 2019, it is crucial to note that according to the UNODC data, the prevalence of drug use has remained strikingly low and relatively stable. The 2016 United Nations General Assembly Special Session on Drugs, what we call UNGAS 2016, was a landmark achievement in the response to the world drug problem for its success in establishing a clear global consensus on the key causes and consequences of the world drug problem, the importance of comprehensive and balanced policy interventions, the need to strengthen the socio-economic aspects of drug demand prevention and reduction, the reaffirmation of the commitment to the UN drug conventions, and the importance of the public health perspective and the urgent need for joint action. Part of the UNGAS 2016 success in the consensus to align drug policy with public health objectives. This is a positive shift in the line with the UN drug conventions that strengthens countries in their efforts to move from dealing with drug use exclusively as a criminal justice issue to increasing involvement of the health and social issues. In the past decade, the knowledge and evidence base concerning effective and sustainable alternative development program has significantly improved. Implementation of best practices in alternative development has yielded increasingly impressive results. The inclusion of narcotic drug abuse under the Sustainable Development Goal 3 to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages must be regarded as a milestone achievement of the response to the world drug problem in the last decade. This illustrates the global consensus to tackle illicit drugs as obstacles to development and as public health issues. There are more UN organizations, such as the World Health Organization, the UN Human Rights Council and the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, the UNAIDS and the United Nations Development Programme that have become important stakeholders in tackling the world drug problem. This is very positive because it signifies the considerable development of comprehensive approaches to the world drug problem, covering different aspects and perspectives. In the decade since 2009, more guidelines have been compiled and made available for governments and communities to implement evidence-based interventions in the fields of drug prevention and treatment. But as I said, as much as all these developments sound promising, We cannot be content and stop as all is not good. Widespread inaction towards a more humane, balanced and comprehensive approach to tackling drug use in many countries remains troublesome. Too few people receive the help they need and deserve. In countries like that, drug policies often serve as an excuse for inhumane behavior and human rights violations on the part of the governments in question. The 2019 World Drug Report shows that drug markets are expanding and diversifying at a scale never documented before. This supply-driven expansion of drug markets has reached the highest level ever recorded, with the production of opium and the manufacture of cocaine fueling this development. Along with the rapidly changing drug markets, the addiction crisis is accelerating. Non-medical use of prescription drugs and the new psychoactive substances are increasingly coexisting with heroin and cocaine that have been available for a long time. And more psychoactive substances are being synthesized, and more are available than ever, with increasing reports of associated harm and fatalities. One of the most serious shortcomings in the response to the world drug problem over the past decade is the lack of adequate treatment and recovery services. Drug treatment and health services continue to fall short of need. Just 1 in 6 people in the need of treatment actually receiving it. The severity of the treatment gap differs between regions. For example, in Africa, only 1 in 18 people with drug use disorder receives treatment. There are civil society organizations that do the noble and very difficult job in filling the treatment gap, but we all know that they are stretched and that the need must be answered by the governments. Investment into alternative development remains an underused approach to drug supply reduction, although political support for alternative development is strong and widespread. Addressing the world drug problem from a public health perspective is too often limited to the health of the individual, instead of utilizing methods addressing causes and consequences in the broader population. The access to essential pharmaceutical products is an important element in any national health strategy. Universal health coverage cannot be achieved and guaranteed without availability, affordable and quality-assured health technologies. After so many years of discussions, WHO estimates that still 5.5 billion people, 83% of the world's population, live in countries with low or non-existing access to controlled medicines for treatment and severe pain. The harsh law enforcement, brutal police force, even violence and militarization of the response to the world drug problem has not completely ceased and remains a serious problem in a number of countries. But another concerning trend that is obviously in the rise is a war for drugs. We are witnessing a global, well-funded propaganda campaign to change people's perception of narcotic drugs. It is a war over politicians' minds, over media people's minds, over young people's minds, and over parents' minds. Moreover, it's becoming increasingly clear that the ultimate goal of this propaganda war is to make narcotic drugs just acceptable worldwide and widely used, just as integrated in the culture as alcohol is today in the Western culture. International and cross-border collaboration and coordination among governments and regions has been inadequate and has further contributed to the stalled process. We have not learned from the lessons in alcohol and tobacco regulations implementation. The implementation often fails due to the interference of the industries, profiting from the freedom of trade of these substances. Experience from many decades with alcohol and tobacco control show that there is no good reason to legalize other harmful substances that have lower prevalence, availability, and public acceptance. Moreover, the new drug industries, such as the marijuana industry, are bonding with the alcohol and tobacco industry, learning from the playbook of their successful older brothers in how to conduct lobby campaigns, distorting effective narcotic drug policies if they are in place. Civil society is playing a crucial role in revealing the practices of these harmful industries that show no respect to the well-being of people if their profit should suffer. The large-scale interventions that address the lack of services, infrastructure needs, drug-related violence, xenophobia, racism, poverty, unemployment, social exclusion, marginalization, and social disintegration have largely been ignored in the response to the drug problems. Here we again have several spearheading examples of civil society efforts to approach the problems in a comprehensive way. Another danger that is important to highlight is that the international conversation about the world drug problem is dominated by a Western agenda, where the national backdrop is the more affluent populations, well-developed health system, social security services, and the reasonable good government structures and practices. But in many countries in the global south, conditions are very, very different from this. Weak health systems are already overstretched by the burden of the classical communicable diseases. And the new non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases put additional burdens on the health services. With such a backdrop, already overstretched health systems do not provide the solutions necessary to tackling the growing drug problem. The needs of countries in the global south deserve more serious consideration. Prevention of the earliest possible stage is the only viable solution. Despite progress and a number of positive developments, as presented in this report, the list of shortcomings, gaps, and persistent problems in the response to the world drug problem remains too long. However, for each of these remaining issues, effective evidence-based responses are available. There is no need to invent the wheel, but there is a great need to grab the steering wheel as the global community knows what to do. Science shows what works. Guidelines and political commitment exist and have been considerable achievements of the work in the past decade. What is critically missing is the political will to make good on promises, to mobilize political leadership, to turn commitments into action, and to implement evidence-based policies and programs. In the countries themselves, do not pay enough attention to these solutions. It is the civil society organizations that back up the work and simultaneously demand governments to take care of the steering wheel. I have shared with you our analysis of what has improved and what is stalling. But this kind of analysis is not enough if it's not supported by concrete steps to take. These are the solutions where civil society plays a crucial role in the implementation. Civil society is often the only actor that invests resources in prevention. We need to change that. Civil society stands in the front of mobilization of the communities. Civil society is often the only actor that offers affordable treatment, rehabilitation, and harm reduction options. Civil society plays a crucial role when it comes to reintegration of people with drug problems. Civil society is often the only provider of support for health groups of drug users and people in recovery. When I was preparing this speech, every time I was about to talk about what governments needs to do, I realized that there are civil society organizations already showing the way. The insight keeps me both proud and humbled. Civil society is leaving an impact on all levels. In a small village in the hills of Thailand, but also in the corridors in the United Nations in New York. And when I look back to the opening here, and I look back to India, this huge country, coming from Sweden, in the tiny country in one part of the northern part of Europe, what can India do? What can Asia do? Then I'm thinking of a young girl. She has been sitting outside the parliament in Sweden for 1 year. And the last days she has been in New York. She refused to say hello to Trump because he denies the climate change. But she has given strength and hope to young people all over the world. We need, you and me, we need to find those people from our side who could stand up for a better life in the future without drugs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Espion. We now invite Mr. Sergei Kapinos, as introduced before, the Russian diplomat who assumed the post of the representative of the UNODC Regional Office of South Asia in November. This office covers 6 South Asian countries: Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. As regional representative, Mr. Kapinos focuses to increase awareness about the risks and impact of organized crime and corruption on the rule of law and security of the people in the region. We welcome him, and in the next 15 minutes we'll get to know more about the focus in Asia, which is our priority for the next 3 days. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana. Let me excuse myself. I'll be a kind of a maverick without PowerPoints. I'll present something on behalf of UNODC. First of all, Namaskaram and Suprabhatam. No? I'm truly delighted to be here amidst such a distinguished gathering in God's own country, Kerala, as the regional representative of UNODC. As you may be aware, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime assists member states in their struggle to combat illicit drugs and international crime. Over the past 2 decades, the UNODC Regional Office for South Asia has been working with governments and civil society, as mentioned, in the 6 countries of South Asia, providing technical assistance on challenges pertaining to regional security, crime prevention, justice, and health. The commitment to sustainable development goals, human rights, and the rule of law are the core elements of UNODC's mandate. UNODC is a long-standing and trusted partner of member states with proven experience and in bringing national legal frameworks in line with conventions, 3 drug conventions, the Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, and 19 universal legal instruments against terrorism. It possesses expertise in evidence-based programming, integrated capacity building to various law enforcement and civil society institutions, and in promoting regional cooperation. With great pleasure, I extend my warm welcome to all of you, with a very special welcome to the Fourth Wave Foundation for convening this very important conference here in Cochin. Kerala, as a land of ports and center of international maritime trade, has always been historically the eclectic hub of global cultures, ideas, and thoughts. It is therefore only appropriate that an international consultation and discussions here are convened in this land on a very pertinent global problem, drug use. Ladies and gentlemen, drugs and their impact on health and security of people have become a major source of concern all over the world. All countries and regions are adversely impacted by drug use and trafficking, and people from all backgrounds are equally affected by this menace. According to the UNODC World Drug Report 2019, an estimated 271 million people, or 5.5% of global population aged from 15 to 64, have used drugs, while 35 million are estimated to be suffering from severe, serious drug use disorders. Around 53 million people worldwide had used opioids. Globally, both the range of drugs and drug markets are expanding and diversifying as never before. So the dilemma whether the glass is full half or full empty is still on the agenda. Opiates, cannabis, and amphetamine-type stimulants remain the main substances of concern in South Asian region, with record levels of cannabis herb seized in Bangladesh and India during 2017. Yet, for people with drug use disorders, the availability of and access to treatment services remains limited at the global level, as only 1 in 7 people with drug use disorders receive treatment each year. South Asia, and especially India, are uniquely affected by the scourge of drugs. The region's vulnerability lies in its geographical position, as it falls between two major drug-producing zones or centers. These are the global triangle and the global crescent. It is a matter of great concern for all member states and for national security. The findings of UNODC's Afghanistan Opium Survey 2017 are very disturbing in this respect. Opium poppy cultivation has significantly increased, and traffickers are now supplying drugs around the world, even to extremists and criminal groups. This poses a critical challenge for law enforcement and health professionals. The southern route of opiate delivery, on which India is located, is being actively used by syndicates and is a direct threat to the people of South Asia. In addition, coastal states in South Asia are vulnerable to maritime trafficking as a result of their exposure to trafficking routes across the Indian Ocean. One more reference to UN studies and findings. According to the INCB Annual Report 2018, there appears to have been a noticeable growth in drug trafficking by sea in the Indian Ocean region. In India, several sizable seizures of heroin were carried out at sea in 2017. 6 tons in January. Can you imagine? 6 tons, and some 1.5 tons in July. In 2018, several vessels carrying large shipments of tramadol from India were intercepted by Sri Lankan authorities, while in 2016, police in Sri Lanka reportedly detected almost 1 ton, that is 900 and something kgs of cocaine, on a ship bound for India, representing one of the largest cocaine seizures recorded in South Asia to date. Relations between organized crime and terrorist groups are also evolving, much like drug markets themselves. Drugs continue to represent a major source of revenue for organized crime networks, but business models are changing, with criminals exploiting new technologies such as the darknet that are altering the nature of the illicit drug trade and the types of players involved. New ways of delivering drugs further point to the need to involve other sectors such as postal services in the fight against drug trafficking. Unfortunately, our children and youth remain extremely vulnerable to drug use and crime. Children and youth are influenced by a complex interaction between predispositions and various risk factors, such as peer pressure, social norms, reinforced by harmful media messages, mental health issues paired with a lack of protective factors in the school or family environment, making them more vulnerable to initiate substance use or transition to dependency. Let us make no mistake, we are facing a real, genuine crisis, and our response must be urgent, swift, and resolute. But how? This is a very big question. It is not answered in many places in the world, and we are here to find out how to address this menace. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the role of civil society into the forefront, which comes now. I believe that countering the scourge of drug use merits a strong and coordinated multi-stakeholder response that involves civil society, governments, law enforcement agencies, UN, healthcare, and professionals, and media. Without a doubt, we must reaffirm our support to balanced, health and rights-based approaches to drug supply and demand that, most of all, put people first. The fight against drug use also needs strong support of social and healthcare departments by setting up scientific, evidence-based treatment centers. Prevention requires sharing resources and developing partnerships with NGOs and community-based organizations. Civil society organizations play a vital role in harm reduction, implementation, and advocacy at international, regional, and local levels. I'll repeat what Mr. Hornberg said about civil society. Well, without civil society, its full-fledged involvement in combating drug trafficking and use, well, it's really impossible to be effective in this fight. Civil society organizations play a vital role in almost every aspect, especially if we are talking about monitoring, evaluation, and impacting, people on the ground. Today, there are numerous civil society organizations providing services, promoting and advocating for harm reduction at the global, regional, and national levels. These include international and national non-governmental organizations, harm reduction networks, and drug user organizations. Civil society play, as I mentioned, a very significant role in the independent monitoring and evaluation of policies and programs, conceptualizing and initiating innovative solutions to social problems, mobilizing communities, implementing programs, delivering services, representing and advocating for the interests of affected communities, and consulting with affected groups. The effective implementation, and it was also mentioned by Mr. Hornberg, UNGA's outcome document and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development requires a holistic approach that involves civil society at the local, national, regional, and global levels. I'm pleased to share that civil society organizations participated actively in the UNGAS 2016 preparatory processes, including through various regional consultations. Member States' recognition of the importance of civil society in addressing the world drug problem was demonstrated at the outcome document, where civil society is reflected 11 times in total. Member States are resolved to take the necessary steps to implement the recommendations in close partnership with other stakeholders, including civil society. Let me dwell on something related more closely to South Asia. In South Asia, NGOs have been actively involved in drug demand and harm reduction activities with knowledge support from UNODC since the past many years. Some of the areas where NGOs have been playing a vital role include awareness building through school interventions, prevention and mass awareness programs, and drug dependence treatment and rehabilitation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you a few instances where civil society has created impact in South Asia. In Kerala, the Fourth Wave Foundation, through its anti-drug campaign, Project Vanda, has been reaching out to adolescents vulnerable to substance abuse. The campaign aims to address the root cause of drug use by redirecting the energies of children and young adults through creative and healthy pursuits. This culture of learning, empowerment, and acceptance when young people are the most vulnerable seeks to promote healthy and responsible behaviors. In Sikkim, Sathi has been a model intervention of NGO and government partnership. Sikkim, despite being India's smallest state, has a higher than a national average consumption of alcohol and tobacco, with very high prevalence of substance abuse among children in both urban and rural areas. Here, the government and the network of NGOs have been working hard together since 2013 under the banner of Sikkim Against Addiction and Towards Healthy India, abbreviation for SATHI. SATHI's objective is to limit substance abuse and generate awareness among students, parents, school administrations, and community about the health, social, and economic implications of substance abuse. The drive lasting change in the behaviors of different layers of society, especially children. The initiative is anchored on a well-developed peer education model. So the SATHI program contributed in training the peer educators to provide the initial level of counseling. The peer educators understood how to initiate the discussion with their classmates who are in drug use and what methods to use to reduce and eliminate their use. UNODC has also developed the Global Family Skills Program. This is something absolutely new, brand new, and very effective in some states. We are introducing it in South Asia, which aims to strengthen family protective factors such as communication, trust, problem-solving skills, and conflict resolution that are relevant to their culture. It focuses on relationship and behavior changes and includes opportunities for parents and children to spend positive time together as ways to strengthen and bonding and attachment between the parents and children. The training module is being piloted in different countries, as I mentioned. Now it is in Bangladesh. with active participation of community groups and civil society organizations. Clearly, there are multiple areas where civil society stands to create tangible impact and support governments in addressing drug use. In a nutshell, following are some of the ways in which NGOs can work with UNODC and the governments in promoting healthy living and protecting women and youth from drugs. Ladies and gentlemen, providing support with parenting skills programs elaborated in the UNODC Family Skills Initiative. So supporting parents is being better parents in very simple ways. These are warm child rearing style. Parents set rules for acceptable behaviors. Closely monitor free time and friendship patterns. Population-based interventions. These are reducing adolescents' interest in substance use by informing about the full picture with harmful effects on the drug and long-term adverse consequences. Introducing life skills education to manage curiosity, peer pressure, and stress. The third element is limiting the availability of substances to make them more difficult to obtain and use. School-based interventions. These are developing policies in line with international prevention standards and rolling out awareness campaigns like UNODC's Listen First campaign. Community interventions. Carrying out village-level activities, providing knowledge support to youth clubs, using sports recreation as a platform against drug use. Another area is support in drug use treatment, identifying adolescents who might be at risk or who show signs of problematic use and to reduce the use before it escalates. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll step aside from my official presentation and express my views gathered during my long work in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. This organization is famous for its involvement in development and implementation of systemic reforms in the countries in transition from centralized to market economies, from strictly controlled political systems to democracies. So this is about reforms, and I have certain experience in developing and implementing such reforms. So let us understand that we are facing a huge, humongous global system of transnational organized crime with its ramification in trafficking in drugs. So this is a system, and this system can be defeated only by a more effective system. So let us discuss how such a system can be developed. Well, there are certain elements, I believe, in such a system. First of all, we need to develop long-term strategies. Well, they are not in place, unfortunately, in many countries. These strategies should be complemented or followed up by short-term policies and action plans with clear-cut objectives and instruments, including mechanisms for monitoring and evaluation. They should be in place, and this is where civil society can play and should play its vital role. Then, if we are talking about a global or even a regional subsistence of transnational organized crime, international cooperation, very close and effective, and combination of systematic approaches at global, regional, and national levels should be also in place. This is also missing, this is challenging, and well, we need to discuss how to evolve it. Another element of such an effective systematic approach is involving all stakeholders. I mentioned, so these are not only governments, but civil societies, media, the private sector, and academia, of course. Then we need to understand that we can be effective if we equalize, well, our combating both demand and supply sides. And in this sense, we need to understand what are the concrete pull and push factors. If we are talking about supply, so these are mostly pull factors, because the main factor is humongous, fabulous, well, incredible level of profit. So this is the main pull factors, and if we understand it clearly that this is a criminal business and it is about huge profits, we need to address financial aspects of trafficking in drugs. And this is not easily said, but well, not easily done. Because, well, even if you are talking about South Asia, all of you know of the existence of Hawala and Hundi systems. So these are networks historically developed, which are using now well sophisticated internet technologies. So this can be defeated only through the breach between civil society, which can be a source for information for law enforcement agencies, and developing networks of criminal intelligence sharing between different law enforcement and national agencies. So this is of utmost importance. Still, this is something lacking in South Asia. South Asia is lagging behind other regions of the world. For instance, UNODC has successfully established such a intelligence sharing mechanism in Central Asia, Southeast Europe, Middle East, in certain areas in Africa, and now in Latin America. Still, this is something pending in South Asia. So we have suggested, we had a project for establishing such a mechanism, and now the establishment documents are under consideration of the governments, and I'm pleased to know that the three governments of South Asia, namely Sri Lanka, Nepal, and the Maldives, have signed such documents. And as soon as the government of India signs, we can launch the second stage of our project and make it really practical. We need also to understand that while talking about systematic approach, we need to address corruption. In many cases, and this is also quite evident in South Asia, even well-developed approaches by law enforcement and even if good policies are in place, corruption networks make all the efforts of the governments void and null, absolutely ineffective. Notwithstanding huge seizures, we need to understand that the system, the structure of drug trafficking is still intact. And this should be discussed, I believe, at this conference as well. We do know that there are different approaches in the world in terms of addressing drug problems. The so-called soft and strict, and even harsh. It was mentioned. On the extreme side of it, are the approaches in the Philippines, for instance, where there is a well-known war on drugs. But one should understand that the immediate ramification of such a strict approach is a violation of human rights. And as you know, UN is against violation of human rights, and victim-centered, human rights-centered approach is the nitty-gritty of all UN policies. So in this sense, although there are different approaches in the world, and there are some good examples of soft approach, like the results of new policies in Portugal, for instance, But still, I believe that one-fits-all approach, well, is not acceptable. So a tailor-made approach in every, region of the world, in every country should be pursued with full taking on board of cultural, historical, habitual and behavioral specificity of each nation and ethnic groups. So I do hope that this conference will discuss some of the points raised by me, and I wish you very productive, very fruitful discussions, and of course, it should be aimed at some practical, I would say, objectives like developing networking, sharing best practices, experiences, and building strong partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kapanos. That's what we'll exactly be doing the next 3 days. Most of what was being discussed by the first two speakers is our task for the next 3 days. I invite the next speaker for the next 15 minutes, and then we break for lunch. This is more to introduce you to Project Vendor. You must be wondering what's the authority for us to be hosting a conference like this, make claims about Kerala and India. I think a little bit of what we do and our work will sort of throw light on why we think this conference should have happened in Cochin and why it's necessary for India to be looking at this as a large social issue. So this is C.C. Joseph for you, speaking about Project Vendor.
Good afternoon. Am I deaf or you're not speaking? Good afternoon. I know you are hungry and maybe lunch is waiting, but yes, we are talking on some serious subjects. So maybe we'll start with a new word for those who don't know. So can we together say Venda? So you have just told me you don't want lunch. Have you? Okay, because Venda in our language means no. And that is what the project is all about, where we encourage children to say no, not just to drugs, but there is a culture around here. For example, let's say there is a party happening at home and the parents or the father is drinking, and tendency is to ask the child to get the glass or the ice or the water. So we tell or we encourage our children to start saying no there itself. Saying, Daddy, if you want to drink, it is your choice, but I will not bring a glass for you. So that is what Project Venda is all about, not just working with children who are addicted to drugs. Because in our little experience, you know, we live in a very confused world. I don't know if you realize. We have fat people who want to become thin, and thin people who want to become fat. You have tall people who want to become short, and short people wear everything possible to become tall. You have fair people sitting in the sun to become dark, and dark people putting all possible creams to become fair. You have countries where they don't have clothes, they wear clothes, and in countries where they have plenty of clothes, they throw away the clothes that they have. And in this confusion, our children have to grow. And maybe that is where you and I play a very important role. When I stand here, I know I am no one to speak because some of your experience, like for example, Mr. Johnson, your experience is actually more than my age. No, but just to share what we do. Before that, I don't know if you're aware, but we have an online streaming happening. And more than the people over here, there are 500 people actually watching us online. Okay, so if you want to share the link with your friends, you can share. And to our friends watching us online, if you want to communicate anything to us, you want to send us a message, you can note the email over here, asiaforum2019@fourthwayfoundation.org. And we will respond to you. So actually this conference, as of now, we have around 130 here and almost 500 watching online. So that is maybe by afternoon I'll tell you from which countries and how many countries are also watching us online. Let me start this maybe 5 to 10 minutes by sharing some experiences that I have seen in the social sector. Okay, I'm not talking about drugs, I'm not talking about anything else, but some experiences. And I have seen 4 types of, or 4 dimensions of work in the social sector. It's just to lighten the mood, and maybe you can identify which category or which dimension you or your civil society or your government works. The first dimension, Everything comes with a video, so I would like you to pay close attention to what is happening on screen. I don't know if you realize this is called door delivery. Okay, you have the deer running around and running around and running around, finally landing right in front or falling right in front of where it, I don't know, where it should not be going. And there, I have seen a lot of people in social sector doing this, running around and running around and running around, and after maybe a couple of years, nowhere to be seen. Did they do a lot of work? They did. Did they run around a lot? They did. But at the end of the time, I don't know, you will not see them. I don't know, if you are like that, you would not be here, right? So at least we don't belong to this category. Second is a little more interesting category, the dimension 2. So please watch the video for a few seconds. I call this dimension drag on. I don't know if you have seen people like this. Oh, somehow there is a problem. Let us do something, and the whole activity that they do is a big burden. And this not only destroys themselves, the first dimension only destroys themselves, but this dimension destroys the organization they are with. And in management, you often say the best way to destroy an organization is to get into leadership and do nothing. If you do something bad, people will oppose. If you do nothing, then nobody can do anything. The third dimension is, maybe I've seen a lot of organizations like this, so watch very carefully, please. Called the oh my God dimension. I'm sure you have this experience in your life. You have this type of, you have seen this type of, from far, or from many long ago that an issue is happening or an issue is going to come. One example can be climate change by now. For many years ago, we knew something is going to happen, something drastic has to be done, but we were very quiet until the last moment, we do nothing. And maybe the issue on drugs is something like that. If we don't act now, then we will reach somewhere over here. Now, did the child get saved or not? I don't know. But the child, even if the child is saved with a lot of injuries. Okay, so this is a dimension where you don't only destroy your organization, you destroy people around you. And the fourth dimension, maybe a lot of people over here will belong to this dimension, so please spend a few seconds watching this.
Más de lo que puedas dar.
You see this brother of this little girl coming up after his treatment for cancer, and he lost all his hair. And this young child, sister of this boy, very joyfully living up or giving up everything she had. Was she sad at any moment? If you watch the video, was she sad at any moment? No, her parents were at. And when they saw her, they were surprised, what is this child doing? But she did it so joyfully. She did it with so much of happiness. Whether it is benefiting or not is not her concern. She is trying to do what she thinks is right. And I believe most of us in this hall belong to this. You have taken so much of effort. You have taken so much of time, so much of money, so much of all your resources to do what we are doing. So before we continue, can you just look at the person next to you and say, well done? Don't worry. Maybe next couple of minutes on what Project Venda is all about. When we started Project Venda, Fourth Way Foundation, I'll talk on the last day. When we started Project Venda, we had 6 key things in mind. And these are the 6 key things around which our projects revolve. We identify the problem, we did a research on the problem. Our job is to create a model, implement it, monitor it, and hand it over to the government, because we know as a civil society, our reach is not very long. The government has immense reach. We can maybe impact a few cities, maybe even a state. But if a country like India has to be impacted, the government has to take up the model. And that is what is there in our mind. So maybe we say that we will run a model for 5 years. And every time we do a project, we say that 10 years from starting the project, we will be jobless. Because somebody else will actually take up the project and continue and run the project. We don't want to be eternally doing the project that we are doing. If in 10 years or 15 years we are not able to address the issue, then there is something that we are not doing right. Okay, so after 15 years, maybe when you come to Kerala, you might not hear Diana and me doing Project Venda. It would be someone else. Maybe the state government would be running Project Venda, and that is the vision or the dream that we have. Second, we have interventions at various levels. One is we do trainings in school. We have community interventions. We have alternate pursuits. Maybe one of the biggest successes of Project Venda is alternate pursuit. 2 of our simple boys who were playing football with what we call Pepsi bottles and all, they represented India in the Homeless World Cup, and they got, India won the Dragon Cup. And for us, we always share with great pride, more than winning the Dragon Cup, these 2 boys who were journeying with us got the award for fair play. And kids coming back with this background getting a fair play award is something tremendous for us. So we always, we tell them, you winning the cup is not important for us, but you getting fair play award is very important for us. Then we do a lot of research, and finally, we influence policy change. And maybe this conference on one level is about influencing policy change. In the schools, what do we do? The details of the training I will share a little later on, but we have realized that entering a community is easy through the schools. We do 2 important things in the school. First and foremost, we engage with children so they can make informed choices. Second very important thing, we work with children to help them understand the implication of their choices. Because very often our children don't know the implication of their choices. In our experience, most of the kids who fall prey to substance abuse either start as experiment, or they are forced by their peers. Very few of them actually go and say that I want to be drugged. They are either forced by their friends or they start as an experiment. So we work in the schools where we teach them what choices are and how important these choices are and how maybe a lasting impact these choices have in their life. And secondly, for us, working in the community, or the community is the only solution to this problem. Unless and until all of us hold our hands together, we do not see a solution to this problem, especially in reducing the demand. Because we have examples and we will share. For example, in a community that we work, today if a stranger comes to that community, the community people will go and ask. If that person is behaving suspicious, they will go and ask, why are you here? What is the reason? Why are you standing outside the school when the school is, when children are going back home? Unless and until that happens, I don't know if we can actually have a lasting result for this, because you and I after some time will go and have to go. The community has to take this mantle upon themselves. And why the community? Because 2 important things we always believe. We build a culture of taking ownership of the child's problem and not hold the child alone responsible. Sometimes what happens in our culture is, if anything bad or wrong happens to the child, we think the child is responsible. And long back, I remember one person telling me, CC, have you ever noticed that we teach our children good manners by bad manners? I said, what do you mean? He said, how do you tell your kids to keep quiet? I shout. So I'm actually teaching good manners with bad manners. So maybe just putting it in a different way. Because we as a community need to be held accountable if our children do not know how to make responsible choices. If they are not making the right choices, it is not just our kids' problem. It is all our problem. We have not been with them or helped them or encouraged them to make the right choices. And that is what we believe at Project Venda. We work with the age group from 3 to 20. We only work with youngsters. And like I said in the beginning, our average age is 28 years. And maybe that is why young people, when we do training for school children, I also don't take trainings, because they look up to me as some big outsider coming and talking. But when an elder brother, who is just a few years maybe older to them, stand and talk to them, all the ears are open, their senses are open. And that is what Project Venda does. So maybe I just want to summarize with what we always say. Together we can change the story. Only together can we change the story. All of us working independently, we can make small, significant, maybe changes in the story. But if the story has to change completely, we have to hold our hands and do it together. So together, let's join as we shout. As we shout. Thank you and God bless.
We won't say Venda now, we need lunch. So we break for lunch, and we come back at 2 o'clock. You have a long lunch. We can meet back here in the hall at 2 o'clock. The lunch is served outside. You can help yourselves come back to the hall with your food. A couple of reminders to the group. There is a panel just after lunch, and the panelists and the moderator will meet at this table after you pick up your lunch. So you can pick up your lunch and come to this first table so that we are ready for the first panel in the afternoon. Okay? There are bottles in your bags, deliberately, because we now live in a no plastic zone for the next 3 days. This place, the hotel is a no plastic zone, and we also follow it at Project Venda. So we've put bottles in your bags deliberately because there are filling stations outside. Please use your bottles. There are bottles in the hall, but if you're traveling and back to the room and in your room, if you need something, use these bottles, please. Also, the live streaming is happening. The links are available. If you ask one of our teammates, they'll pass on the links to you. Please send it to your people who really are missing this conference. There are a lot of people who couldn't join us for many reasons. Nations we couldn't bring in because of the national protocol. Pakistan and Afghanistan, all of them are watching us live. They're actually sending their notes and comments live. We'll have all of that shared here through the day. So kindly pick up the live link and pass it on to all your friends and co-workers and people who really want to join us in this hall and this discussion. So happy lunch. No more keeping you back. See you at 2. Thanks.